Should the White Sox be picky about position regarding any potential return in a Garrett Crochet trade? Let's discuss next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the White Sox front office is intent on trading ace pitcher Garrett Crochet this offseason. So let's discuss why then the Sox must get the best hitters possible regardless if they're set at a position long-term. Then, even though catcher looks like the Sox are set long-term, SoxMachine.com's Josh Nelson said on this very show a few weeks back that a backstop is a position the team will target in free agency this offseason. So let's look at that market. And then finally, it's Minor League Monday prospect reviews. So let's look at how catcher prospect Edgar Quero did in the minors. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, I'm still a die on this hill. Do not trade Garrett Crochet. But I'm also a die on this hill. Who cares if the Sox are good at a position long-term? If the club is offering, if the return club is offering a talented prospect who happens to play maybe catcher or shortstop or third base, bring that prospect in if that's part of the Garrett Crochet return. And look, I'm a die on this hill where I don't want Garrett Crochet traded, but I do understand the logic because it's sad that the White Sox are not spending much money in free agency. So the only way that they can possibly improve their lineup, the only way that they can possibly give themselves a chance to get the hitters in the system needed to potentially be competitive by 2027 is to trade their ace. That's also where I'm like, man, this is why I almost want to die on that hill, because it's like, this shouldn't be. The White Sox should not have to trade one of their best players just to upgrade their lineup. And also, I'm not even going to turn up my nose on more pitching in a return for Crochet, even though the Sox have plenty of it. Because that's going to be also another reason why the front office is so motivated to move Garrett Crochet. They have plenty of pitching depth, and they have plenty of starters that project to be elite aces that they can move Crochet. So the Sox should be treating this trade like the draft, and that is get talented players with high ceilings up the middle, with the exception of, hey, if there's a talented hitting third baseman available, you should also consider that. And that's how any team should be having a draft strategy. Draft catcher, pitcher, shortstop, center fielder. Why? Because those positions are so valuable. Whether it's the defense and run prevention and catcher and pitcher, or the fact that catchers usually have a lot of pop in their bat, especially when they're young, or the athletic profile in shortstop or center fielder, plus the positional versatility. Shortstops can always go to second or third. Catchers can go to first or left. Center fielders can go to left or right. You get a lot of positional versatility. Although, again, a third baseman who can rake, you should never turn your nose up at, because, again, they can always go to first base. But I want 125 to 150% return of Crochet's value, which right now as a pitcher is an 4.7 F4, 200 strikeouts, and a guy who made an all-star team. And pitches so well that you should go out and see him pitch. He's a draw at the gate. So that's a lot of value there, even though for the guy that, some team's going to come back and say, well, he only threw 4 innings over the rest of his starts in the second half. Well, that's the only thing he has left to cross off his list. And he's cleared every other hurdle. So who's not to say that he can't pitch, 160, 180 innings? And since the club just won 41 games, they need more young talent that project to have high ceilings where their F4 is going to be 4 to 6 per season, or at least their floor is 2. They need more of those types of players. Need more of those impact bats. Enough of these barely replacement level players. Get impact players on this roster. That's another reason why you should be a little frustrated, because the easy route would be just go out and sign Willie Adames and Anthony Santander. Spend some money. Move top prospect Colson Montgomery to either second or third. Maybe prospect Brian Ramos. You move him to wherever, right field, left field, second base, first base. I don't care. Put Miguel Vargas, who they still value, and I don't know why, put him wherever is left over. You can technically play second and left field, although he plays a terrible left field. But, you can move these guys around. You want to create these headaches for yourself, not be like, well, we're good at catcher. We're good at shortstop. We're good at third. We don't need anybody. Especially since, again, the team is not going to use free agency to upgrade the talent. And that's one of the two simple reasons why Crochet is being traded. The other, they don't want to extend him. It doesn't sound like they're willing to pay him. So since there's a desperate need for hitting, have some standards to get the best return possible, but not the standard of being, hey, we're good here. We're good at this position long-term. We're covered at catcher. We got Edgar Quero and Corey Lee. We don't need that. You need players, good players, as many players with high ceilings as possible. Right now you could say the Sox are set long-term at catcher with with the top 5 prospect in Quero and Corey Lee proving he's good enough to be a solid backup catcher. And that should carry the Sox through the rest of the decade. But then again, that doesn't mean if the Baltimore Orioles decide to pursue Crochet and offer catcher Samuel Basallo as a crown jewel, Chris Getz should say, nope, I'm good. I got Edgar Quero. I'm fine. I don't need Samuel Basallo, especially since Basallo is 20, hits left-handed, just hit 278 with a 790 OPS and 19 home runs between AA and AAA. You can say, well, that sounds like Quero. Move Quero to first then. Or Basallo can play first. Teach him to play first. It's easy, Wash. Tell him, Wash. It's incredibly hard. I love that scene in Moneyball. Although, again, Moneyball always overlooks Hudson, Mulder, and Zito. And yeah, the Sox have coverage at third right now. Possibly long-term in Ramos or maybe Vargas. But at least Ramos, I'm very encouraged by Ramos. But if the dream of Kobe Mayo being the centerpiece, along with some other prospects in a potential Baltimore Orioles trade comes to fruition, bring him in. Bring in Kobe Mayo. We're talking about a guy who posted a 926 OPS and 22 home runs at AAA this year. You don't turn your nose up at that. And if the Red Sox want to offer up shortstops Marcelo Mayer or Christian Campbell, 2 top 10 prospects, or catcher Kyle Teal as a centerpiece, the number 25 prospect overall, I'm fine with that too. The White Sox need talented players, period, in the batting order. The lineup finished second to last in offensive WAR with a 13.4. Only center field and third base produced an F4 over 2. For context, the Guardians won the AL Central, 28.1 offensive F4, and only the DH was a position with the final F4 below 2. See the difference? Plus, create an atmosphere of competition. No one tabbed in the organization as the future should feel like they're entitled to a position in the big league roster. They shouldn't. Not when you've only won 41 games. Make players earn their spot. The last rebuild gave the impression that guys had their spots at the big league, and some of them even got paid before they should have. And that result was injuries and inconsistency. I'm looking at you, Eloy Jimenez. I want at least 2 of the team's top 5 prospects, or I'll settle for 3 in the top 10. And it's a high price. And then 2 scratch-off prospects, but I'll throw in, say, a Jake Eder or even a Davis Martin to get that. But that is the return that they should be looking at. The Sox must get 125 to 150% on the return of Garrett Crochet if you're going to trade him. Well, the White Sox front office supposedly wants to give Quero more time to develop at AAA. So some of the limited free agent dollars will be used to bring in a bridge backup catcher until Quero is ready to take the starting spot from Corey Lee. So let's see who is available on the backup market next on Locked On White Sox. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And I always maintain FanDuel's spreads, over, under, and money lines are fun to play. But if you want to win big or at least double your money, FanDuel's parlays, props, and futures is the way to go. For example, a popular parlay going off at plus 1,718 is Kyron Williams, Devon Cheney, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nakua all scoring an anytime touchdown in the Los Angeles and Miami game tonight. You put $10 on that, and it hits $171.86 has just been won. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe to places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, I would love to see Edgar Quero win the opening day catcher spot, but I see why the White Sox would prefer to be more patient with him, and I'll cover his minor league season in the next segment. Plus, if the Sox are going to spend limited free agent dollars this year, they need to use it wisely, and there's some value on the market for catcher. And I also think the Sox should just look at the catcher market as they're signing a starter or a backup. Well, basically, they could be signing a starter, as I loved what Lee did behind the plate, but he keeps screaming that his ceiling is backup catcher. So they could even be looking at a short-term bridge starter for this year, because I don't think Corey Lee should be your quote-unquote opening day starting catcher yet. He's definitely your backup catcher for the future. And he produced 10 times better numbers after Martin Maldonado proved he should have retired 3 years ago. But still, minus 0.4 F4, 64 WRC plus. I like the 12 home runs. Love the good base running value. Really like the elite pop time and caught stealing above average. But he's not a sacred cow in terms of being a starter. I mean, he's one of the close to untouchables on the roster since he's not eligible for free agency until 2023. So being 26, that's a guy you keep on this roster through the rest of the decade, since he should be a fairly cheap, reliable backup catcher. But you can always upgrade in the short term with, say, old friend James McCann. A lot of his advanced numbers are going down, especially in terms of framing, although I hate how that is still a thing. And I hate how that's one way we evaluate catchers is framing. We should be using an automated strike zone. We have the technology. We should use it. Framing should no longer be one of the most valuable things as a catcher. I'm sorry. I hate that. Especially since we can have an automated strike zone. Boom. Or at least have an automated strike zone on potential strike 3. Or again, a review like they have in tennis. And they're doing it at the minor leagues. And it goes quick. But we know he can handle a rotation. James McCann. His WRC plus last season was 89. And he projects to cost just $2.8 million per spot track. So, obviously he's not going to make the all-star team like he did in 2019 with the Sox. But he's just a very reliable catcher. And he comes at $2.8 million potentially. Danny Jansen had a down year power-wise with just 9 home runs after belting 43 over 3 seasons. But he has a career .308 on-base percentage and a great blocks above average rating. And he projects to cost 2 years at $4.4 million annually, and he's going to be 30 next season. That's another guy to kick the tires on and maybe take a look at. Kyle Higashioka, I totally butchered that name, but Padres backup catcher. He's going to provide some slug. 37 home runs over the past 3 years for San Diego and had a .476 slugging percentage last season. Above average frame rating, had a 1.6 F4, and he's going to project a cost of $1.6 million per spot track. Carson Kelly's probably going to make the most sense given his ties to Will Venable. He played for the Rangers, obviously, last year. Had a 1.8 F4. He's an above average framer and a blocker. Great caught stealing above average, too. Good fielding run value, too. He's 30 years old. He had a 99 WRC plus, projects to earn $2.2 million. I have a feeling that's going to be hopefully the guy that zero in on. Just because, again, if you're saying, if Chris Getz is saying Will Venable is my partner in building this roster, why don't you go with guys that Will Venable recommends instead of, former Kansas City Royals players? And Carson Kelly, like I said, the numbers support that he should be a very solid catcher. Obviously he's not going to be an all-star catcher, but you're talking about value right there. 1.8 F4, so close to 2. Near average when it comes to WRC plus. shouldn't be earning a ton of money, and he's going to do all the other stuff that you like when it comes to a catcher, and especially framing, which I cannot stand that's a criteria. That should not be a criteria anymore. And one of the reasons is, Yasmani Grandal. The only reason why Yasmani Grandal still has value is he can pitch frame. The guy's a jerk, reportedly. And yet he still keeps getting jobs in Major League Baseball, even though he doesn't do anything else well. Doesn't block the plate well. Inconsistent hitter, as we've seen. And the guy once hit, 158 in 2021, but still had a huge on-base percentage. So, yeah, he gets on base. And he can frame pitches. But he can ruin your clubhouse. So if you got the automated strike zone, guess what Yasmani Grandal's value is in Major League Baseball, which it should be. None. Zero. The guy helped destroy the Chicago White Sox. He was a small part of it, but he was part of it. Finally, Gary Sanchez, just because you can use him at DH or catcher, only haven't had 11 home runs last year for the Brewers. But he has hit double-digit home runs in every season since 2016, and expects to cost around $3.6 million. So ideally, you can sign one of these veterans and then even flip them at the deadline if they're producing good value behind the plate. Contenders are always going to look for short-term hitting if they're hitting, or even just a cheap backup catcher. And we saw how bad the Cubs were with their backstops. Maybe, if they're more competitive next year, even though they're trying to win on the margins, maybe they're willing to trade some of their prospects to get some catching help. Dan Jansen went over to from Toronto to Boston because Boston at the time was in the race, needed some catching help. Think about it. The guy actually had the last at bat in that doubleheader, or in that game that got, temporarily postponed. He's, the only guy to ever be the last at bat, or actually be the guy at the plate, but then get traded. So then he's the catcher, so that was, remember, a kind of wild stat. But you could also do, in terms of, if you're still concerned about, like, hey, I would like a path for Edgar Quero to be opened up, you could also do what the Atlanta Braves did in 2022 with how they used William Contreras his first season. They DH'd him pretty much a lot. So Edgar Quero, if he's showing he's ready for the big leagues, you could limit his usage as a catcher in 2025 and use him mostly at DH. Get his bat in the lineup because he has a tremendous bat, and try to maybe develop his bat at the big league levels. Get him acclimated to the big leagues first by just hitting, doing what he does best, and that's hitting. And then focus on the catching, sort of, again, what the Brewers did, once they acquired Contreras. So looking at the catcher market, I would actually say it would be wise to use your limited free agent dollars on this position. Give Quero another month or two at Charlotte. And speaking of Quero, let's review the team's number 4 prospect next on Locked On White Sox. Hey, I've seen Michael Jordan and LeBron James drop 55 live and in person. Some of my favorite memories in college at Marquette were, the Marquette Hoops games, especially since Dwayne Wade was hooping there when I was going through school. Catching a basketball game live is the way to go. I mean, it's just amazing to catch hoops live, and I suggest using the Game Time app for your ticket needs. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so that way you know that, hey, I'm not getting a obstructed view, that type of stuff. And the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time, will credit you 110% of the difference. For example, I don't have season tickets to my beloved alma mater, Marquette, but if I do have a hankering to catch a Marquette Hoops game, I just can go to the Game Time app and see what amazing deals they have, and I can do the same. And the same can be said if you want to catch, say, a Bulls game. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. Welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. Also, hope you had a good weekend. Hopefully the Chicago Bears didn't ruin it for you. Came close to ruining it for mine. Although, I'm just getting tired of some folks on the text chain or in the social media world that are just like bagging on Caleb Williams. Look, he's 9 starts in. Let's give him some time. That's all I'm saying. Be patient. Stop being Stephen A and be like, oh, I saw it. I said it. That's the thing, too, that's just bothering me a little bit about this world. We're all trying to be hot takey lately. And I know I'm in the podcast business on that, but, at least hopefully you've seen, as I've hosted now for 7 months, that I try to be a little patient. I try to give a little grace, try to give a little assessment. And yes, I do go with the times because time evolves. Look at my criticism of Lenine Sosa. I've called him Godfather Part 3 because every time I think I'm done with him, he pulls me back in. That type of stuff. We all want to be like Skip Bayless, it seems like, these days, and Stephen A. Smith. But guess what? Skip Bayless is out of job. Okay? You want to be informative, and that's what I try to do. I try to inform, I try to entertain, I try to challenge you. So that should be what the business is. And that's what we do here at Locked On White Sox. At least that's what I do. There's no we, I. All right, so I'm excited for Edgar Quero's debut. The young man can just rake, and this is someone you want to create a prayer circle, burn some incense around, hope he does develop into a foundational piece of this lineup. I am just begging and hoping that he turns out that he hits his ceiling, and that is going to be, his ceiling can be an amazing baseball player. We're talking about a foundational, we're talking about a draw player. Now, I know I said I would review the Sox top 30 prospects during the offseason Minor League Monday report. So why am I skipping over number 2 prospect Hagen Smith and number 3 prospect Colson Montgomery, according to MLB Pipeline? Well, Hagen Smith was just drafted, and he barely pitched this year for the White Sox after he signed with the team. Pitched 3 games to be exact, and had a 3.52 ERA at high A ball. So there's your report. And Colson Montgomery, everydayers can go back to my conversation about 2 weeks ago with FutureSox.net, Future Sox's Ian Eskridge. We talked a lot about Colson Montgomery, especially at the Arizona Fall League. So on to Quero. And it's Quero, not Guerrero. You're going to hear, that's the thing, you're going to hear his name butchered. And I know I've butchered names. I just did it in the last segment. But you're going to hear a lot of his name being butchered by a lot of broadcasters once he comes up. Guerrero. It's Quero. Also, Quero so far has not given me much concern that he'll just reach his floor. So that's the other reason why, like Colson Montgomery, we've talked about it a few times, that his floor is Paul DeYoung. And he did have, he basically only had a good September and a very good Arizona Fall League. But otherwise, Colson Montgomery gave off Paul DeYoung vibes. Quero has not given me that, has not given me that concern. He did have a terrible May, but then he ripped the heck out of the ball in June through August. Obviously, a back injury then ended his September. But, he didn't really give me that concern or that pause where I don't know if this guy's going to hit his ceiling. Quero finished the season as the number 59 overall prospect, according to MLB Pipeline, number 40, according to Fangraphs. And there was never a worry after May that he was not going to do well, whereas Montgomery, that he wasn't going to do well at the big leagues, whereas Montgomery, again, September and the Fall League, where you're like, okay, maybe he can reach that Corey Seager ceiling. Quero finished with, see, there we go. You can hear somebody saying Quero finished with a 280, 366, 463 slash line and 16 home runs between AA Birmingham and AAA Charlotte. He hit 275 with an 823 OPS in 72 games at AA, 295 average with an 845 OPS, including a 382 on-base percentage at AAA. He was amazing in June for the Barons with a 356 average and a 1.014 OPS. That's what he did in June. That was definitely needed after he hit 167 in May with a 517 OPS. So, yeah, there was concerns in May, and then he just kept hitting and hitting and hitting, and he even earned a promotion. Crushed left-handed pitching with a 346 and a 1.025 OPS for the season, 261 average with a 772 OPS off of righties, but did have 11 home runs. switch hitter that the Sox did bring up for the last week of the season with the taxi squad designation. So he was never active, but at least got to be around the team that hopefully he eventually joins at some point in 2025. Since the team is going nowhere, you could make the argument that why not bring him up then and let him learn his way at the big league level? Why not just make him the opening day catcher? Well, as discussed in the previous segment, the catcher market fits to the Sox limited spending where they can be patient. It fits to where the Sox can get some value players. Plus, time is still on the Sox side, considering Quero is just 21. If he was 23 or 24, which would be considered, for the Sox, that's prime age, because that's usually what their prospects are. They're usually older. And you have to be like, well, then let's get him up. Then I would say let him sink or swim, especially if he was 25. But you still have some time. He's 21. You don't have to rush it too quickly. And this is the one guy in their system that you can feel confident is going to be a dude. So maybe a few ABs beyond the 95 he got at AAA can't hurt. And while AAA pitching is still nowhere near Major League pitching, it at least comes close. I still think you need to do the traditional development plan for hitters in terms of, A ball, AAA ball, or A ball, AA, AAA. Whereas pitchers, AAA should just be nothing more now than the parking lot for pitching prospects that you have where you just don't have a spot for them at the big league level, or your depth, your Tukey Toussaint's, for example. That's where they go. In case you get ravaged by injuries, you at least have some guys that can eat some innings. You put them at AAA. Otherwise, you should be developing your pitchers at AA, just because there's only so many bullets in those arms, and they're technically going to be facing their peers. The fringe prospects are gone once you get to AAA. To AA. Once you get to AA, those are the guys that teams have identified that should be big leaguers. Where low A and high A ball, you still have some of those guys that are like, I don't think these guys are going to make it to the big leagues. They're just draft picks, late round draft picks, depth guys, maybe, scratch off prospects, kids with high ceilings, but maybe they don't hit it, that type of stuff. So I get the AA should be pitching development. That's where you should, and there's nothing wrong with taking a pitcher from AA to the big leagues, but a hitter can't hurt to have them get a few more at bats against, say, those parking lotted pitchers, or those pitchers that, those 4A pitchers where, their stuff it maybe not be good to start every fifth day, but it's still good enough to, hey, if there's an injury and we need to get through 2 weeks, we can count on maybe this guy to come up. So I've got no problem with them, having him start the year at Charlotte. The only thing the Sox might want to do is, if he continues to hit at Charlotte in April, bring him up in time to get Rookie of the Year consideration, because he does have that potential to win Rookie of the Year. And if he can hit his ceiling and he hits the ground running and he has the talent to win that award, you can pick up an extra draft pick. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll be back tomorrow to discuss what the White Sox should do at second base this offseason. And should the Sox consider trading ace pitcher Garrett Crochet to the Boston Red Sox? Feel free to leave comments about today's topics regarding the Sox. Should not be too choosy with who they possibly get back in a Crochet deal, especially when it comes to position, the backup catcher market, and Edgar Quero's really good year in the minors. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On White Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.